You are listening to The Stinger on the All Hornets podcast network, one podcast feed with multiple shows, making sure we cover the Charlotte Hornets from every angle. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, find us on YouTube, leave us a 5-star review. The All Hornets podcast network is affiliated with the Fans First Sports podcast group. Today's show, I'm joined by Patrick Epino from the Oakland Warriors podcast. Patrick covers the Warriors, is part of the Fans First Sports podcast group family as well. Patrick, I know it's early over there on the West Coast, but thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to talking how to divvy up this Warriors team.
Well, I mean, just talk a little bit about that. It's been quite a season so far. It seems like there's a report every day so far that I think Shams just said the other day that everybody is available apart from Steph. There are constant reports about, Draymond Green potentially being moved, Andrew Wiggins potentially being moved, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga asking out. What a whirlwind of a season you've had, and it's only just January.
Yeah, and last season was such a lost season after the Draymond punching of Poole, and they kind of gaslit the fan base saying, "Oh, it's not a big deal." But then at the end of the season, after they got eliminated, they all talked about. Steve Kerr talked about how, "Oh yeah, it was a big deal," and the chemistry was blown. But this season, we thought it was going to be way better. They started off 6-2, and they had like the quote unquote best starting lineup net rating for the last 2 seasons, and they just needed to shore up the bench. But then all of a sudden, that starting lineup was not the same. Everybody except for Steph kind of fell off. Looney, Clay, Wiggins fell off, and then Draymond has been suspended for like 19 games, so he kind of abandoned the team. And now they've had a couple injuries with Gary Payton II and Chris Paul, so they're a little strapped for guys, and it's all just gone downhill. Jonathan Kuminga, who I really like, and I wanted him to get more playing time last season over Anthony Lamb. But
I mean, that's understandable.
Same with Moses Moody. He didn't play at all. That dude played in the Western Conference Finals in 2022, and then pretty much couldn't crack the rotation last season. And then in the playoffs, he plays over Lamb and Kuminga, which is just odd. So I think there's a lot of frustration with the Warriors. And right now, it just seems like after 2 big blowouts, they got booed at home 2 games in a row, and they deserved it. It's the first time people said they've gotten booed during this Steph Curry dynasty era, at least the championship era. And I don't blame them for wanting to make moves. I've had my opinions on who they should move and who I want to keep. But right now, it's like you just throw your hands up, like, okay, Mike Dunleavy, he made moves over the summer. Let's see what you got. He has a little equity with the fan base, at least with people like me, and I want to see what happens. Now, you mentioned a few guys. I still don't think like Steph would ever let Clay or Draymond get traded without them wanting to leave. And who knows where it's at right now, because I think they want to see what they got with Draymond. But let's face facts, like Draymond Green, as much as I've appreciated him and he's been kind of our like lovable underdog for a long time, you're counting on the guy who blew up the chemistry to come back and rescue the team. So it's
not quite so lovable anymore, just an underdog, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a front runner actually, but it's kind of ironic, and you're messing with the basketball gods if you believe in such things, and you're tempting fate. So that's where we stand right now.
Yeah. And obviously, what do you think the Warriors are trying to achieve, by saying everyone is available, putting that out there via Shams, whether that's, you imagine that comes from someone from the Warriors. We're talking about a retool here, right? We're talking about still trying to compete, still trying to build around Steph. We're not talking about a rebuild, just to confirm that, correct?
Absolutely. They're trying to figure out how to get back into contention with this team. They will never, at this point, they're not going to be like top 4, 5 in the West. What the Warriors are looking for, and from my perspective, it's like when you have this quote unquote championship DNA, you just want to get into the tournament. You don't want to get in the playoffs. Ideally, not have to play too many road games. But if you do, these guys know you just need to win 16 games. And they've done that 4 times. and they've gotten close a couple other times. So that's all it takes, and just the right chemistry to peak at the right time, and that's just give them a chance. You know what I mean? And then they can just turn it on a little bit and just go for it. You know.
So, what do you think in retooling this roster around Steph? What do you think they're trying to achieve? What are the major needs of this team? Just again, so we can maybe try and match up here what Charlotte has to offer and see if there are any kind of clear and obvious areas. So, what do you think the biggest needs for the Warriors heading into this trade deadline?
Right now, I think the Warriors are a little small up front. I think they could use a center. I think that, excuse me, I think they could use another wing, to be honest, because Andrew Wiggins is just not Andrew Wiggins anymore, which is odd for a guy without a major injury who's only 28 years old. But I think they also need, they need like what they lost with Jordan Poole, even though I wasn't a huge Poole fan, and what we're seeing from Poole in Washington is kind of what I expected. They need somebody who can just score, and they don't have that. So I would say a big and a guy who can just get points when Steph is getting tired. You know what I mean?
Yeah, understood. So I think from a Charlotte Hornets perspective, to kind of let you know where our situation is with this team, the Hornets this is a lost season now. There is no more trying to get back into the play-in. For me, they're going to this trade deadline largely probably as sellers, or again, like retooling. I don't think they're in a position they're going to be putting picks on the table for anybody. But this team has some massive holes in terms of toughness, physicality, some outside shooting, and like veteran presence. Those are the kind of four key strands that whenever you look at what this Hornets team needs, they need to add that. So I think in any trade between these two teams, the Hornets are going to be trying to add at least 1 to 2 of those areas. In terms of the pieces that are off the table, I think for Charlotte, it would be LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams. I think there would be a very high price on Terry Rozier. And then I have kind of Gordon Hayward in a just has to be traded type mold, because if he's not traded, he might get a buyout, and that does help the team very little. Or, guys like PJ Washington, I think they would be open to moving. Kind of currently like their 6th man right now, but has had to start games because of injury. And Miles Bridges, again, with the right deal, but he's just so hard to trade because he has a no trade clause, because of the off the court stuff, because of no bird rights. I think there's just too many stumbling blocks for any realistic Miles Bridges trade. And everyone else on the team, probably available for the right price. Guys like Nick Richards, who's shown to be a good backup center and a decent spot starter. He's probably the most interesting of those other names. But I'd say that's where the Hornets currently are. And the reason I think the Warriors are so interesting is because there's just a heap of names who I think meet some of those criteria. So I'll run through them all here, and I'll let you choose where you want to go. Andrew Wiggins, as we already mentioned. You're talking about in those finals where they beat the Celtics. He was big, physical, played that small ball 4, was able to be like a rebounding monster, played with such level of intensity and physicality. And I remember watching that thinking, oh my God, the Charlotte Hornets would love to have this version of Andrew Wiggins. And now his stock has plummeted, and we're going to talk about that, I'm sure. But he's a guy who has some interest as a negative asset where it's a complete reclamation project. And I think that's the business the Charlotte Hornets have to probably be in right now as a franchise. So I think he has some value there. You also have Chris Paul. Again, the ultimate veteran experience. The Hornets have struggled for a backup point guard for the last 2 seasons. They've struggled for veteran presence. He's, went to Wake Forest, is very well respected, still can play when he's on the court. He's another guy I think has some value. And then Draymond Green, probably a controversial name among some. I still think he would be someone who would, again, bring like intensity, physicality, defense, which are a lot of things that I talked about the Charlotte Hornets needing. This is all a bit of an asterisk if he's like in a mentally stable place, which I don't think we know the answer to that right now. But I think those are the 3 names that jump out to me. Look, Hornets fans, I can tell you right now, Patrick, are going to be clamoring for Jonathan Kuminga. But I just don't think the Warriors are going to trade him. And if they do, I don't think the Hornets are in the business of giving up the assets that they're going to need. And probably the same, I'd say, with Moses Moody as well, but maybe to a lesser extent. So my view went to the veterans on the Warriors rather than the young players. And yeah, I'm happy to go whichever one of those you think is most interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny because Draymond is good friends with Bridges, and that'd be quite.
Yes, Michigan State alum, both of them, aren't they? And yeah,
yeah. And I mean, it's. I mean, let's go Wiggins, and I mean, Wiggins and Chris Paul are completely viable. I think those are two names that if guys get traded, those are two that are way up front because Chris Paul's expiring contract. And because Wiggins has fallen out of favor, as you said, so we could talk about them.
Yeah. Okay. So with Wiggins, here's my question. He's obviously not the same player he was this year. Do we ever know what exactly happened with Andrew Wiggins taking time away from the team? Because it always seems like since that moment, he's never been the same player since. And I don't know if his downturn this year is it just he's in the system isn't fitting him? Is it just a bad year? Or is there something that we think is fundamentally changed with Andrew Wiggins from that moment?
Well, we all know his reputation before coming to the Warriors, right? Like a guy who #1 pick who didn't live up to it and was better suited being a second fiddle. He came to the Warriors, became third fiddle in those finals in that playoff run. He became overall their second best player during that, and now he completely fell off. And we don't know. Like people have hypothesized what happened or what the family issue was last season, and I haven't heard anything reported that's official, so I'm not going to conjecture about it. You know what I mean? But it was everything you could imagine, right? So this season, there was no chatter about any issues with him physically. Some people, when he started off poorly, thought that he got a busted rib in the Lakers series and maybe he hadn't fully recovered. But there's been absolutely no chatter, and it's been several months since then. And one of my issues with some of the local media and just people like the Warriors is that everybody's asking Klay Thompson or talking to him, and I know it's Klay Thompson, he's a bigger deal with the Warriors than Wiggins, but asking Klay Thompson or talking to him about his shot selection, hunting shots, decisions, chasing like his past or whatever, but no one's addressing like why Andrew Wiggins is not living up to this. I mean, Andrew Wiggins will be 29 in February, and he doesn't have any major injuries in his career. And I'm like, man, I bet you Klay Thompson, I would kill for Klay Thompson to be 28, 29 and have no major leg injuries. I mean, that's when he was at his peak, right? So I just don't get it. And I wonder sometimes, does Wiggins get a pass because he has this reputation, or because he just chooses to be quiet, no one bugs him about it? But that's what is somewhat frustrating about it, because it's like, can someone is Steph going behind the scenes being like, get it together, try harder? What's the deal? Some people have just said he's not in shape. He came in, not focused, but nothing has been really said. And I don't know if the Warriors are protecting him or
so it is a real mystery box situation, it seems. I mean, obviously the offense clearly hasn't been there. Has he been the same? Has it been a downturn on the defensive end as well this year?
No, he's picked it up. He was terrible to start the season, but he's been better. Offensively, he's given it a shot more, and Kerr pulls him if he's not hitting it, but like he's still good on the ball defense. And I always say, like, I heard someone, I think it was Bill Simmons, conjecture that the Warriors should trade Kuminga and Wiggins in a package for Siakam. And I'm like, of course you do, because those are the two most athletic dudes on an athletic wasteland, and they would have nobody to play athletic wings or to defend on the perimeter or point of attack. So he's still got that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting about Wiggins. On to Chris Paul. Where are Warriors organization with Chris Paul. Obviously, he was a vehicle to kind of move out Jordan Poole. And I think from what I understood, he started the year quite well. But do you still think, again, you talk about size, scoring guard, another wing, a center. It doesn't sound like this team is in desperate need of maybe what Chris Paul can give. Is that fair?
The problem with Poole last year was that he was just a turnover machine, still is. And what the Warriors had problems with were non-Steph minutes. So when Steph sits, they were, minus. And Chris Paul was supposed to solve that. And he did to some extent because the bench was better. They were better than the starters. But now that he's hurt and he's out several weeks, I mean,
4 to 6 weeks with the hand injury, and that's from about early kind of like mid-January. So we're talking about after the trade deadline. He's not going to be back till well after the trade deadline here. And the Warriors don't really have that much flexibility for getting in the playoffs, right?
Yeah. So when you're talking about like where the Warriors are right now and you got to make a deal, he's just a trade chip that, you have to put out there because of his expiring, to try to get somebody from like maybe a rebuilding tanking team or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And the Draymond side, just finally to touch on briefly, it sounds like maybe you're more willing to move Draymond personally, but you think it's more unlikely because Steph would be reluctant to go that route.
I do. I think he'd be reluctant because Draymond does so much for him on offense, and he's just a cog on the defense. So I think that's a non-starter unless when he comes back he gets suspended again or he does something and it's just like it's just too far,
Okay. And then the salary cap situation for Golden State in the summer, what is that looking for? Are they looking to kind of shed costs, do you think, for this summer? Is that something that's motivating them right now? Again, just to understand whether they're looking to take back money or looking for expirings.
Yeah. The Warriors are always going to look to shed, right? And Klay Thompson's deal is up. He was originally rumored to be looking for a max, but he doesn't. I mean, he can't. He's not going to get that. But they're way over. They're a second apron team, and they're not going to be able to sign anybody outright. So everything right now is going to acquire a player. It's going to be trades, okay. And not just now, of course, but like down the road. That's how you're going to make it work.
So let's maybe move on to some potential trade talks then. So the first name I'm going to offer up is Gordon Hayward, who is on an expiring $30+ million contract. So he meets that threshold of frees up money for the Warriors going forward. Look, I understand Hayward has a checkered health history, and that is going to reduce the value in any Hayward trade. I completely understand that. He's hurt right now. The calf strain, should be back probably in around a week, so should be playing again before the trade deadline. But he is someone who I think could fit well into a Steve Kerr system. He has a high passing IQ. He can shoot the ball. He can score in the mid post. He gives you a scoring wing, which is some of the needs that you're talking about. And he's expiring going into next summer. He's a win now player. Like, he's a guy who you're not waiting for him to develop. I think he would come in and contribute and could possibly be someone who could re-sign in Golden State after the season if he has a good time there. Do you think he matches any interest, and what kind of packages built around Gordon Hayward do you think would potentially be of interest?
I think Gordon Hayward, I think he helps in that, like you said, the passing and the scoring element. He probably would fit. He's not the sexiest name for Warriors fans because they've already shown that they're pretty slow and they're getting older. And with those injuries, Hayward is older than his age. He probably, to me, just on paper, would be more helpful to the Warriors than, not defensively. Yeah, he wouldn't help the Warriors defensively. I was going to say he'd be better than Andrew Wiggins, but I don't necessarily think the Warriors would spend any of their their trade capital on Gordon Hayward, just because if you're going to take Wiggins, if you're going to try to move him and Chris Paul, they're going to try to get probably somebody from another team that helps them more specifically in their needs. I mean, Hayward can score, and that's one thing in particular. But I mean, I could see lineups where he would work, but I just don't know if he would be the guy that the Warriors would be like, okay, let's move so and so to put us over the top or closer to contention.
So this comes down to what the team see Wiggins as his value, right? Because you could argue, look at Andrew Wiggins right now and say 4 more years of this at that price, he is a negative value contract. And Gordon Hayward gives you a route out of that. But it doesn't sound like, from what you said, that the Warriors are quite at that point yet. They are hoping that this is a blip, a dip. They would be open to trade. I think Tim Kawakimi reported today that he thinks they will trade Wiggins, but you think there will be a bigger fish would be the return than rather just a good player who gives salary cap relief. You think they would be pursuing something, a little bit more impactful?
I do. To be honest, if like you told me right now, there's nobody else that wants Andrew Wiggins, I would potentially make that deal. But it could probably, it might give them a better chance to get to the postseason, but I don't know if it would help them. But there's, I just don't think it's something that would move the needle all the way to where the trigger would get pulled.
Okay. And then if we're talking about for the Chris Paul side, obviously not for Wiggins, but you're talking about Chris Paul, that does get the team a lot bigger, right? Obviously you lose the backup point guard, but Gordon Hayward would be able to come in and, assuming that he is back in a week as he's due from his calf injury, he'd be able to come in and play immediately in the next 4 to 6 weeks, which Chris Paul could not. Do you think there would be any interest there for a Hayward Chris Paul swap in that sense?
I think that the Warriors
you give me the truth. You don't feel you need to sugarcoat this.
In a vacuum, maybe, but I think honestly, I think Warriors fans would be like, "Oh, are you serious? You got to Gordon Hayward with these trade assets." Again, I think they'd be willing to package like Chris Paul and Andrew Wiggins and maybe one of their young guys if they can get a shot at somebody like better,
someone major.
You know what I mean? At other teams. I mean, the names that get tossed around are the ones I'm sure you've heard them, gosh, I mean, fans get
Siakam,
right?
Murray, those type of people.
Yeah, and people are talking like Jared Allen, and I'm like, is he even on the block? Just fans making stuff up, but just guys tossing stuff out there to fit specific needs. And the one thing is that Hayward is just older and slower, and that's not what the Warriors would probably get shredded for getting an older, slower player.
Okay, understood. So I'll hand over to you. Are there any potential players or moves that you think that you can see between the two rosters that make any sense?
Let's see. So which I would try to make a small trade for Nick Richards, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. He is a 7-foot screen rim dive center, sets really good screens. Would be something that Steph Curry, I'm sure, would enjoy. Offensive rebounder, rebounds really well, blocks shots, is limited in what he will do. He can't really pass it all. He's not a great processor of the game. That would always be my worry with the Warriors. In the dribble handoff situation, he's pretty limited. But for a team that needs size and physicality and interior presence, I can understand him being someone of interest. I get that.
Yeah, and what his contract's $5 million. So, it's not like a big trade, but it's somebody that, I mean, I think that he would probably, what I liked about him is when I saw him last season, when I played against James Wiseman. I mean, in that first game again in Charlotte, where the Hornets beat the Warriors at the beginning of 2022, or the 2022-23 season.
I remember
that was
the peak of the Hornets season. That was literally the best single moment of last season. So I remember that game exactly.
Yeah, and he bodied Wiseman, and I was like, "Oh, come on!" And so, while Nick Richards may have some flaws, the Warriors could use some just guy at the end of the bench, and I don't know if he would be necessarily better than maybe a Trace Jackson Davis for the Warriors, but because Trace Jackson Davis does a lot more. But just to have some size, he may not be the ideal person that Warriors fans and media are looking for. But if we're talking about somebody that fills a need that is potentially available, I would be like, sure, I like that guy from last season, put him out there. And when the Warriors play centers, teams with bigs, like, hey,
Yeah.
give us 6 fouls and just rebound the ball and try to play some defense. So
Yeah,
I
and
think,
we've said in our
yeah,
podcast before, Nick Richards is probably like a top 5 to 8 backup center in the NBA. That's kind of like how we pitch him. And I know Warriors fans won't have seen a lot of him, but he is perfectly respectable, and he gives Golden State something that they don't really have, like in their other center options. Like even Trace Jackson Davis, Kevin Looney, they are much smaller guys, and he's much more size, which could be useful. I guess. What do you see on the Warriors roster? There's 2 names that jump out to me. Gary Payton. I'm not sure how you feel about him. Not someone we've talked about a lot. And probably Moses Moody. Again, seems to be very popular from what I can see among fans, but maybe less so with the coaching staff. Those are the names that jump out to me. But what were you thinking with Nick Richards?
I would love to give you Gary Payton. I mean, the guy's injured again, and he's a bit injury prone at this point. And but I also think he's one of Steph's favorite guys on the team, and he does fill a need, the point of attack guy when he's healthy.
Yeah.
So that would be who I offer up. But I don't think Moses Moody is, I don't think they would move Moody for Richards at all. The Warriors do like him. The fans like him. And that whole thing with them chanting Moody's name was because they like him, but also because they disapprove of some of Kerr's decisions and rotations. So I don't think if he is potentially, of course, like to be had, but again, I think they would try to package him for a bigger fish overall. But I 100%, I think I would swap Richards for Peyton, because you're either getting some size to protect the rim a little bit, or you keep the guy who's point of attack. So it's a tough one for the Warriors in that respect. Just gotta look at what they need now.
So I'd probably opt against that deal for Charlotte. I'd consider it, right? If it wasn't for Peyton's health, then it would be more interesting. I mean, he is a really good veteran presence. That guy's been through a lot in his NBA journey, been out the league all the way to the finals. He is probably one of the best defenders in the NBA when he is healthy, and he's learned a way to play without the ball, especially in Golden State, and brings that really well. And, the Hornets probably had like a smaller size version of Gary Payton last year in Dennis Smith Jr., and he made a real impact on the team. So I do think there's value there. The things that scare me away are his health history, right? Whereas Nick Richards has been somebody who's been pretty available. He's 31 years old. Nick Richards is 26, and Nick Richards is signed for another year. So, like, if you're doing a stock up, stock down here, I think Nick Richards is continuing to build. Gary Payton feels like with the injury and age, he's beginning to dip. And for me, that like I wouldn't quite pull a trigger. Although Gary Payton's skill set specifically would be of interest to add to the Hornets, I just think that Nick Richards is I don't think that deal quite makes sense. Like if the Hornets were one defensive guard away, like from being a playoff team, then yeah, maybe. But they're so far away, it seems strange to kind of give away a player who is for an older guy who is on a shorter contract, who, let's be honest, Gary Payton will have no interest in being in Charlotte once that contract comes to an end. So I think for that reason, I would need more draft capital coming back with Gary Payton. And I don't know if there's, to be honest, it would, like you say, if it would make sense for both sides.
Yeah, yeah. No, I that is perfectly legit. Uh Let me ask you, you said that the price for Rozier would be pretty
Mhm.
high. What would the price be? Because just Rozier is like a scorer. He's small. I don't think he's particularly good defensively, but he doesn't necessarily fit the Warriors, but like he does score. So I'm just curious from a Hornets perspective, like what that would
Yeah, I
take.
mean, look, Terry Rozier's averages this year are better than Kyrie Irving's and Damian Lillard's. Like, if you look at them, I'm not saying he's better than both those players, but this season he's been playing particularly well. He has been the Hornets' on-ball defender for the point of attack, while also being the primary ball handler to create for others, while also being the clutch guy to carry them down the stretch and to score during games. He's had to do everything this season, and he's done it remarkably well. He signed for another 3 years. He's the leader of the team in terms of being like the culture setter. He's valued, I think, more by this front office and coaching staff than he generally is valued around the league, because he's a 6'1" scoring guard, is basically how people view him. So I think he means a lot to the Hornets more than others, which is why I say I think his price will be high. I would say you're looking at for the Hornets specifically, they'd have to be really blown away for an offer. So something like 2 first-round picks. Again, if you could, I don't think trading Rozier in a Wiggins deal would be something. Again, you're trading someone whose stock is going up versus someone whose stock is going down, and that could it could look really bad in 6 months after that trade. Like Draymond Green for Terry Rozier. Now that's interesting. Okay. Me personally, I don't even know that. I'd consider it. I would consider it. Like, I think this would be one where I'd want to speak to Draymond to be like, if you come to Charlotte, Draymond, like, you're not going to retire here? Are you like you're going to come here and buy in, or do you just hate the idea of this from the start? Because this team just needs, I know here's his flaws. Trust me, I know he's a little bit strange, Draymond Green, but equally he holds everybody accountable. He sets a physical tone. Him and LaMelo Ball in the dribble handoff actions could be so exciting and interesting to see. I've long thought Draymond Green, if things ever went south in Golden State, could be interesting. So yeah, I don't know if you think that's something. I don't think the Warriors would consider that for a second. But as a Hornets fan, I think some Hornets fans would reject it as well. I'd actually be open to it.
Yeah. Warriors fans would not be happy with that,
No.
and I think it just doesn't make basketball sense on the court, right? To get to
Smaller,
give up
worse
the one
defensively.
guy that. Yeah. So I was just curious because how other teams perceive their own players and whatnot. So I know that's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like we've been able to find a deal that would work. I was hoping Gordon Hayward as an expiring, not the play so much, but his money flexibility would, and a bit of a scoring would maybe be of interest for Paul or Wiggins, but it doesn't sound like that's going to be getting done. Like you say, it might be maybe one of those things where if other deals don't get done and the deadline is ticking down, then maybe it's something the Warriors circle back to. It's on the table, but it's not their first choice. It's their plan C, D, or E. Do you think that's kind of a fair summary?
I think it is fair because if everything else falls out, and if by the trade deadline come February 8th, Wiggins hasn't turned it around, if the only thing left on the table is, get off his contract, then I can see that being a potential, but just to have someone. But I think what the Warriors have with Wiggins is that, he did it before, and he's still good defensively, and we're going to need that. So it might be a tough pull if you're getting weaker defensively.
And would you say CP3 is ahead of Wiggins in the pecking order? So would you say that even less likely for CP3?
I I think CP3 is he's just part of his contract is part of a package. Like that's what it is. It's it would be a sweetener, and it would just be I think it's almost equal. because of the circumstances of his contract and his injury. But if all things being equal, I think they would want to keep Chris Paul over Andrew Wiggins to some extent if their contracts were the same and they were both healthy.
Interesting. Okay. I'm still dreaming of Chris Paul ending his career in Charlotte, doing the Tony Parker 1-year deal in Charlotte, and then he can sail off into the veteran sunset as a player. And, and like even someone as Chris Paul, I've thought about this over the years, being in a front office or a coaching role, like he's one of the wisest basketball heads there is. He can rub his teammates up the wrong way. We saw that in a couple of stops, right? But that's because he holds people accountable, which again is just something this Charlotte Hornets team lacks. But Patrick, I think we've probably come to the end here of our mock trade discussions. I'm a little bit gutted we couldn't get a deal done. I was hopeful of this one. But you can't force these things. I understand the Warriors have their sights set much higher on players probably that are more impactful than what Charlotte can probably offer.
Yeah, I forgot to ask about PJ Washington, but that's for another day.
He's available, but I like PJ Washington for Andrew Wiggins. That works straight up. I had that one written down on my sheet, but the way the conversation went made me think the hope for Wiggins is to turn into something bigger than a rotation stretch four.
I would actually do PJ Washington over that. I would do that trade over.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe I haven't watched enough PJ Washington. Maybe you're down on him, but no,
I'm not.
He's younger. He's and he doesn't have an injury history.
Obviously, it's 3-year declining contract. Washington, so 16 this year, goes down to I think 13 in his final year. Is can play some small ball 5, play 4, but he's not a wing defender, right? That's probably he very much more of a front court player than a wing guy. But I mean, Washington for Wiggins, that's a very interesting one of your Charlotte. I would strongly consider that. Again, this comes down to Andrew Wiggins. What is going on in that head of his? I would have to do my background research intel. And if it all turns out to be good for Wiggins and that we think this is just a blip, then I would do that Washington for Wiggins deal. But if that background isn't great, if there's, worries about does he really love basketball? Has he lost the love of the game? Then I would probably shy away from it.
Yeah. Like you said, for the Warriors, he doesn't give them anything on the perimeter. They lose a point of attack guy. They get less athletic, and it's not like PJ Washington is 6'10", 7 foot.
No, he's 6'8", 6'7", 6'8" on a good day.
Yeah, so I think with him, just for me, it's like the frustration with Wiggins and whether or not he's going to turn it around. I would potentially pull that trigger if nothing else came to fruition. So that would be the trade I would green light with.
I think that's the one we're closest on. I think that's the one of all the ones we've talked about. I think that's what we're closest on. A reclamation project for Andrew Wiggins. He brings you an on-ball defender for the wing. That's an interesting one. It would be background intel dependent, but that's interesting. Well, that's a good one to finish it on, Patrick. I'm glad you brought that one up before we finished out there. Tell the people where they can find your podcast if they want to get more Warriors news.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube at youtube.com/Oakland Warriors. You can find me on the socials at Oakland Warriors as well.
Great.
That's it.
Well, Patrick, thanks a lot for your time. If there are any trades, anything that happens with the Warriors in the future, we'll definitely have you back on here.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.